Hello, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how the far right have actually now created a system where they kind of now are fooling like the working class. I was on a bus and got into a very heated debate. I'm not going to say much, but the bus driver even intervened because it got very heated. Now this pensioner was making a lot of scandalous claims about Corbyn, calling him a terrorist once again, calling him a communist and every name under the sun that's been said. Now when I tried to explain to him that this is all just a fabricated lie that the right-wing media have created just to vilify him, in the same way of the McCarthy witch hunts of the 60s. For those who don't know, the McCarthy witch hunts were where they claimed anyone who had any socialist leaning was a communist, and they vilified them. People such as Charlie Chaplin were no longer allowed into America because they thought they were communist. Basically, it was just mass paranoia. Now, I was trying to give him very interesting points. Number one, there was no evidence to suggest he was IRA. However, I responded with "shut up and let me speak." He was willing to get this massive rant out, but was refusing to let me say that there is no evidence for anything that he's saying, that Boris Johnson would not be great because of his past histories, his fact that he supports a lot of privatisation in the industry. He's a city banker, he has links with many private companies, yet he didn't want to hear this. In his words, Boris Johnson was better because he was not an IRA sympathiser. What does that tell you about our current situation? That the media are kind of earworming into the senior citizens. And his reasoning for why he wants Boris is that he'll give him a tax cut. Bear in mind that this is the same person was then mourning about the fact he was going to lose his TV licence and that his bus pass would be next. Now, you don't need to be a rocket scientist on the left to see that you give from one hand and you take from the other. So these taxes that he's going to save, that he thinks he's going to save, remember that they'll recoup it back other ways, like via VAT. They'll take that back up, they'll put interest elsewhere. There's always smoke and mirrors with these guys. They'll put it somewhere else, but they'll do it stealthily. Now he thought that was worth the price to pay. But what he failed to understand, and I'm assuming that a lot of pensioners are exactly the same thing, they failed to understand that they will take the money that they get from their pension things such as free TV licenses, bus passes, and they'll just scrap them. That is where they'll save their money. And at the same time, they'll save money elsewhere. They'll get rid of housing benefit. They'll get rid of things such as the disability living allowance, a lot of stuff that people rely on. Yet the media will vilify anyone that's okay. The I'm alright Jack argument comes into play. Now the problem with this is there's a very famous poem, I think it's a poem. It might be a quote, but it was, "When they came for the Jews, no one stood up. When they came for the gay people, no one stood up." And it ends with, "And when they came for me, there was no one left." That is what's going to come down to. They always want to blame someone else for the issues, yet they'll come after them next. They can't penalise the poor any more than they have at the minute, so they're attacking the pensioners. Now, the pensioners are still falling for this hook, line and sinker, to the point where they are now coming across, they think they're going to be fine, and that's the problem. They've got this "I'm alright" attitude, and they don't care about 10-20 years in the future, because let's face it and be honest, a lot of them won't be there in 10-20 years. But the likes of your children, the likes of your friend, the likes of their grandchildren, they're going to be there, and they're going to pay the price. They're going to pay the price of their grandparents voting for something because they got an instant fix. And their kids and their grandkids, they're going to be the ones that's going to have to fix it. This is what's happened now. This is one of the reasons why we're in so much debt, because we've rolled over more debt and someone else has to pay for it. That's how the system works. You borrow money and then you eventually have to pay it back, but who pays it back? This is the problem. We need a progressive system. Now, whether you like Corbyn or not, his arguments are a hell of a lot better than the capitalist system of low tax. We know for a fact that without tax, you can't fund things. You can't fund the roads. You can't fund community centres. You can't fund a lot of things. Yet they're alright with that because they don't use the community centre. They don't use the local library. They don't need the police. They said the police are useless anyway. Yet we are now seeing, with the television licence, now they are starting to understand a little bit, but they're still not getting it. They're still obsessed, and they still think Corbyn is a traitor, and because they've believed all the media coverage, because there was a picture of him put in a reef. Now, Corbyn has said himself that he wants to try and help everyone, and he was never picking a side. He was trying to ensure a peaceful process, but they disagree with that. They don't agree with that. They think it's black and white. He was a terrorist sympathiser, and a lot of the evidence has been disproven. There was a supposed photo with him, which claimed out to be a completely different person whatsoever, and the BBC are constantly allowing their guests on Question Time to deliberately slander the leader of the opposition. Whether you like him or not, he deserves a trial, at least. He deserves to be proved if it was or wasn't. And I hope that Labour, and I hope they do this, I hope they will now start going to people like Piers Morgan, people like Michael Portillo, Andrew Neil, and saying to them, look, if you keep referring to unproven accusations, we will take you to court for slander. Corbyn did that with an MP. Why can't he do it to the BBC? The BBC need to address this, because they are letting their guests get away with it constantly. And people are starting to believe it. Personally, for me, I think Corbyn would do a lot better than Boris Johnson. You only have to look at the idiot. He wants to do trade deals with Donald Trump. And America has really terrible food standards. And I'm not talking about chlorinated chicken. I'm not talking about hormone-injected beef. I'm just talking about general food standards altogether. In America, it is perfectly illegal for McDonald's to put the same chemicals as flip-flops into their burgers. Thankfully, don't have to do that. The law protects us and gives us that protection. But if you are doing trade deals with America and they want their food standards lowered, that will mean that when you take your kids to McDonald's, you will be getting terrible things in the meals. You will be getting pink slime. Whether whatever's in this pink slime, whether it's reconstituted meat or if it's just what's left over, you will be getting your kids hooked on that. You have a Big Mac, you'll probably get fillers to make the burgers cheaper. At least in this country, we have food standards that are really high. Yeah, and everyone agrees our standards are high. And if we do leave the EU, the law, most people do want to keep our high food standards. But a trade deal with Trump would have to lower them. So that is why I do not think Trump is the best person to be trading with. Now, out of the candidates, there's only really one person who I think would actually be good for the country, but he's not got a cat in hell's chance, and I don't know how much what he says is true or not, and that is a guy called Rory, I think it is. Forget his other name. But a lot of what he says doesn't make sense. He's saying we need to like forget about hard, soft boiled, poached Brexit. We now need to get together and kind of work something out, because we're going to go around in circles if we keep going the way we are. Boris wants a hard Brexit, and he has been warned that if they even attempt a hard Brexit, there will be a vote of no confidence in the government, which will lead to a general election anyway. So ideally, they don't want that. The party's in civil war still. Now, Labour had their own civil war, but at least some of the people who came there, at least they've had the decency to walk away now. Chuka Umahr is no longer a Labour candidate. There's a few others who've walked away. So that is the issue. At least Labour's civil war, although it's stoking up with Jeremy Corbyn's indecision, which I disagree with. You need to be either pro referendum or pro Brexit right now. Don't sit on the fence. It's costing you votes. You'll still get in, but you won't get in as much as you think. You're gonna lose. Put it this way: you're gonna lose votes anyway, whichever side you pick. But you need to pick a side now. There's no way around it. You can't just say, "Oh, we'll have a referendum," if that's not going to happen. You need to put forward that you will have there is a strong likelihood that we are going to have a general election next year. I think even the bookmakers think that now. So the question is, and I think this is a fair and honest question, what do we do? Do we walk away with a deal? Do we kind of lower our red lines, or do we plod on and keep our fingers crossed and hope that if we believe hard enough, it'll be all be okay? But this is what annoyed me about this rant. This guy was so adamant about his own agenda, about the fact that he was only bothered about taxes, that he wouldn't have to pay any tax, that he gave in to the fears of everything will be taxed. No, you only have to look at Norway. Their model is a stronger economy. They still have a fair tax system, but they've got enough money to provide free education for higher education. That means they can actually train people who are needed in that industry. They don't have to rely on other people to come in to fill the vacancies. So they have doctors, they have nurses, they have teachers, they have engineers. And that's because they've got a fair taxation system. And everyone's happy because it means they pay a little bit more tax, but they get so much more out of it. Their son or daughter can go to university and not worry about a massive bill lingering over them. They have a really good healthcare system. They don't have to worry about going ill. They don't have to worry about any of that. And how they've done it is such an amazing way they've done it. What they've done is they've kind of mixed the good and bads of both sides, the good of both models. They've invested in things such as Microsoft and IBM and all these other major companies, which means that their dividends get spent in the country. So that education, welfare, everything's pretty much done. However, if we look at our end, we have a massive inequality in pay. We have a massive inequality in social and healthcare. We don't have, and that's the other thing. This pensioner was more than happy to pay less taxes, but he didn't think about what happens when he's unable to look after himself on his own. Who looks after him? And this is one of the big sticking points. Okay, then I'm going to leave it. Okay, bye.